The fact that people are more annoyed that someone crashed somebody's wedding than they're annoyed about the state of our planet, it seems to me to have got their values a bit askew, and I think it seems to me to be part of the problem.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is Ben Okri, newly knighted, Sir Ben Okri, in fact, who has just brought out a new piece of work called Tiger Work, stories, essays and poems about climate change. And it is the great driver that you often talk about with your work and your position as one of the foremost writers in this country as your great passion.
Yes, I must confess that it's been a quiet passion for most of my writing life. It's only recently that it's become more dominant. Which is to say, it was always there. It was there in The Famished Road. It was there in my early books because I was always aware of what, we human beings have been doing to nature. Forests in Nigeria, rivers, the air, the toxic atmosphere, bad air, too many cars, companies belching out fumes, killing people.
Is that an obvious part of a Nigerian childhood?
I think it's an average part of a childhood in any of the modern nations of the world. It's now unavoidable. It's very hard to find places where you're not being poisoned by toxic fumes of one kind or another. It's very, very hard.
And you consciously want to use your position as a writer, as somebody with a knighthood, to advance arguments and thinking around this.
Yes, I think it's something I'd like to, for now, dedicate that position to drawing attention to, and also to strengthening and to spreading awareness through my art and through the voice that I have.
Now, it is very much art. This is not obvious.
It's not agitprop.
Simple.
Yeah, it's not agitprop. It's
poetry.
No, it's art. It has to be.
So
it has to be art first.
Yes.
Before it can become anything else. I take that as given in a way. I'm surprised other people don't.
So is this a sort of an anthology of work that you have done over the years, or do you approach it as a specific piece of work?
Well, I built it around the idea of climate and climate resistance and the work we're doing. So the idea was to address this issue in all the forms of literature, because I wanted to use the power of each form. With the letter, for example, you can be very direct. So I have a letter. I have letters, interviews. With interviews, the same thing. The interview is not art. It's a very straightforward, what do you think of this? This is what I think. The letter is the same thing. Dear Earth. And you're addressing it. You're speaking to the earth directly. The poem has to combine something of indirectness and clarity. The short story, oh my goodness, you have to have characters. You have to have, So the pleasure for me was just building this cubistic text, so that I used all of the powers of literature to find a way to persuade, to suggest, to hint what this world has become, how we're damaging it, and the kind of questions we can start to ask about it.
Cubistic text. That's one I haven't heard before. That's the different forms you've just described, is it?
Yeah, the cubistic text for me is a text that goes all the way around the subject, the back, the front, the top, and the bottom, and you just surround it. So you look at it from all different angles at the same time.
You pose Tiger, Tiger, burning bright at the beginning. Why is it Tiger Work?
Well, first of all, it's a tribute to the great William Blake, who directly and indirectly is, I think, an environmentalist and would have been a champion of the work we're trying to do, which is draw attention to this great crisis that's hovering over the human race. And also because the tiger is one of the most hunted animals in the world. People want the tiger for its ferocity. They want its eyes. They want its claws. They want its stripes. They want its symbolism. They want its energy. They want its magic, its totemic quality. So it's haunted because of all the things that makes it extraordinary. So the extinction element of it is a key part of it, and is symbolic of our extinction. If the tiger goes, we're going to go. It's as simple as that. Every extinction presupposes, suggests, hints at other extinctions to come. And also because I feel that the tiger is both a fierce and a beautiful creature. And I feel that the climate work, environmental work today, being an activist, a cultural activist, climate activist, I think you have to be a bit of a tiger. You have to be fierce in spirit. You have to be fierce, and you have to be beautiful in spirit. Because if you're not beautiful in spirit, then what the hell are you doing it for? It's not because you just want to draw attention to a cause. It's also because you care about the planet. You care about the beauty of this earth. You care about human beings in this and all the species that we share this extraordinary planet with. And that's a beautiful thing. That for me is one of the highest definitions of beauty. A great love of nature, sense of the richness, wisdom, patterning, value. That's beauty. That's what beauty is for me.
Will you give us a taste, first of all, of, well, perhaps some poetry, one of the facets of this cube?
Well, yes, it'll be a real pleasure. I'm going to read to you from a poem called Broken, which is one of the main threads in the book. When they asked me to come up with words that could speak to a world on the verge of environmental collapse, I had a crisis of my own. Fever runs in the veins, the season runs on broken groves. The facts are horrific, the evidence overwhelming. And still we carry on, as if no crisis were looming. Thunder hovers above our roofs, earth shakes beneath our floors. What can one say to those who either don't want to hear or have heard enough? What can one say that does not paralyze some with the sheer scale of the problem? In the end, I wrote a poem of 2 lines composed of just 12 words. The words were photosynthesized on grass grown on Hessian and floated on the brown river. Can't you hear the future weeping? Our love must save the world. Good Thames, glide gently while I sing this song. Good Thames, we know not for the earth how long.
It's very powerful.
Thank
It's
you.
passionate.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you describe yourself as a climate activist. What is it that you fear or you believe is happening that you want to change? Because saying the world is being destroyed, is being poisoned, is a big notion, but it's a very difficult one to get your head around. What do you actually think we need to do?
Well, it's not a difficult thing to get our head around at all. It's a combination of all the small and big actions that we've been doing for the last 100 years. Our cars, our fumes, our aeroplanes, the way we treat the rivers, the cutting down of forests. We've been destroying nature. We've been destroying nature. We've been poisoning the atmosphere. We've been doing this for the best part of 100 years, and it's just accumulated and got to a point where the emissions now and the ozone and the very air we breathe, the rising levels of the sea, global warming, it's now all come together in such a stew that it's now affecting the possibility of our species on this planet.
Was there an alternative?
There always was an alternative. Absolutely. There could have been more caretaking. There could have been the government could have taken a greater interest a long time ago about fumes, about smoke from companies. I remember growing up and seeing every day the distilleries near us, these huge plumes of smoke coming out every day. We took it for granted. We just thought that was a natural part of the way the world was. It wasn't. It did not have to be like that. The government could easily have clamped down on it and said, you have to reduce the level of it. You have to sort out that smoke. You can't put that into the atmosphere. We are breathing this smoke. It's affecting our children. It'll cause asthma. It'll do this. It'll do that. Just the look of it alone was enough to tell you we're back to beauty again. The ugliness alone was enough to tell you this is not good for human beings. And then the rivers, they just treated the river like it was we do now, even more so, like it was a giant sewage. You just dumped chemicals in it to a point where the fish died. I remember the rivers I grew up in were clean, they were crystal clear. You look into them, you could see fish swimming at the bottom. You could see stones that looked closer to you than it really was. And within 5-10 years, the rivers were murky. Another 10 years after that, they were gone. The same thing with forests. So in all different levels, we have been slowly destroying this ecosystem.
Would you have slowed the development?
I wouldn't have slowed. I would have slowed the development, and I would have insisted on finding other ways of doing half the things we're doing.
Because it's still happening now in many parts of the world,
yes,
particularly the developing world, where people will say, "Well, this is the price of development. We're not going to slow our development just because the developed world has already noticed what's happened."
Yeah, it's not a case of halting our development. I think it's a case of being aware of what this price of development is doing to us. I completely sympathize with the developing world, as you call it, and their need to go on developing.
Only for want of a better phrase. I don't know what the best phrase is these days.
Yes, I know. We need a few drinks and we'll come up with a better one. But I still feel that we're all in this ship together. It doesn't matter whether one part of the ship is not benefiting as well as the other part. We're still on this ship, and we need to do something about the environment in which we're living.
What do you seek to do then with your poetry?
Just spread awareness. Just make people more aware of the way in which we are innocently and not so innocently contributing to the death of our world.
Do you think you can awaken people, or are you always, is the person who buys a Ben Okri book called Tiger Work about climate change, are you preaching to the converted?
Well, first of all, there are people who would buy it because of its title. A lot of people have said they love the title. There are people who would buy it because they know that whatever I write, it's intended to be a thing of beauty. I never write about one thing. I'm constitutionally incapable of writing about just one thing. So even if I'm writing about climate, I'll also be writing about love, about the truth of the human condition, about justice, about how the mind works, about reality and our understanding of the relationship between us and I'll always be doing so many different things. So they're really buying a Ben Okri book, which comes with all of the complexities and richness and playfulness.
You begin with 3 parables, don't you?
Yeah.
And you pick up the book thinking this is a book about climate change, and then you go, right, okay, I've got to reset and think, actually, this is 3 parables about water.
Yeah.
Just tell me about those.
Well, water runs through the book, and I think water is one of the most intimate. I think there are 2 areas of life deeply intimate to us, water and air. Food, yes, but not as intimate as water and air. Water is so crucial that to think about water in relation to where we are right now is a very, very gentle, suggestive way of entering into the complexity of this problem. And the 3 parables about water just gave me an opportunity to look at water and what water means to us, again, in 3 different ways. Water as love, water as knowledge, and water as education. Water and love is the key one because it's about a river that I used to know growing up as a child, which was a great river. And then they polluted it and poured things in it and chemicals and stuff, and then gradually it died and then it disappeared. And it's my dialogue with that river that's gone. And the disappearance of that river, it took away my childhood, took away all of my early life. Actually, my mom and dad are no longer here. It just took away. It took away all of that, and I'm looking at the cultural and spiritual loss of what that kind of disappearance means to us as human beings. The same with the forests. I grew up in a world rich with forests, where the forest was a deity. The forest was a place of initiation, a place of healing, a place where you went to get roots and leaves to cure various ailments, a place of storytelling. And with the passing of the years, this forest just slowly diminished, and the diminishment grew, and then it vanished. I went back 1 year, and it was gone. And yet all this time, I used to watch big trucks with timber on the back of them, one by one, grinding down the streets. And we didn't make a link between those trucks and the disappearance of one of the most valuable aspects of our environment. And that's how it happens, invisibly, imperceptibly, day after day, without our making links and paying attention. That's all I want to do in this book. I just want to help us make links so that we see. And I think it's part of the problem. We don't see how a tiny thing we do, added to someone else's tiny thing, adds up to a big thing that threatens our world. And that's all it is. If we're aware of these tiny things, and if we can get our government to be aware of the big things, we can turn this ship around.
I mean, you've spoken of your emotional link to nature and to the world. What is your emotional link to Nigeria now?
Oh, Nigeria is the ancestral land, isn't it? Nigeria is it's still the place I go to when I dream. It's still.
You dream in Nigeria?
It's the place I still go to when I dream. There's certain dreams I've been having all of my life. I still have them. There's certain places, certain mysterious places that I can't. When I wake up, I ask myself, where was that place? And it was a real place that I half remember. And I've been dreaming about that place since I was a child. And I still dream about that place now as an adult. Now when I have that dream, it's very comforting to me. It's like going back to an old enigma. I've never solved this enigma, but the enigma now comforts me. It links me with the ancestral land. So my relationship with Nigeria is very profound. Every other piece of my writing is set in Nigeria. There was a time when all of it was set in Nigeria, but a large part of my life has been spent in Britain. So Britain too now is part of my dreams and part of my storytelling. Yeah.
I mean, do you feel angry about what Nigeria is now, environmentally?
I feel.
Or sad?
I feel very sad that we have been so unaware. I was going to say indifferent, but maybe that's too harsh. Maybe it's not. Maybe unaware is fine. Unaware is neutral enough. We've been so unaware of what we have been allowing to happen to that beautiful land.
I mean, it's about creating wealth, isn't it? That's why it's happened.
Yes, it is partly about creating wealth, but it's not. Half the time, it's not our wealth that we're creating. That's the worst part of it. It's the wealth we're creating for other people. You know, we send our products, we send bits of our environment, actually. We send it out into the world, and they pay nothing for it, and send it back to us, and we pay vast amounts for it. That's a very basic way of looking at it, but that's essentially what is happening. We send out bits of our flesh, bits of our land, bits of our myth. We send it out there as raw material. And then we pay through the nose for it when it comes back to us. That's the two sides of that is very it's very depressing. But the rivers, the forests, the air, the oil, and what's been done to the Delta is disgusting. They're vast patches of land that will never be usable again, never be arable again for centuries to come because of oil spillage. It's disgusting. If you see it, it's a vision of hell on earth.
And how much do the Nigerians you know that you're still in touch with share that view of what has happened to their country?
They share the view of the exploitation very much. They share the view of the injustice. They share the view of the corruption of of many of our leaders, very much. But the environmental dimensions of it has not quite percolated enough. Not in this recognizable form.
I mean, as you talk about raising awareness and the environmental movement and protest, how do you feel about the way protest is in Britain now?
I'm not concerned so much about the way protest is in Britain now. I'm concerned more about the about the response to protest in Britain. I am concerned that people are more annoyed and feel the need to legislate legitimate protest about the environment out of existence than actually listening to what the protesters are really trying to say. I mean, this is one movement. I mean, you know, the modern Western civilization has been founded on the legitimacy of protest. You know, most of our freedoms that we take for granted have been fought for and won by people who, you know, gave their lives in protest and sacrifice, whether it's the freedom marches of Alabama, whether it's the suffragettes, whether it's apartheid South Africa, whether it's India, whether it's protests against colonialism. All of these things, we've won these freedoms, even free speech, freedom of speech. We have won these through protests. That is to say, through being annoying and irritating and in some cases obstructive. And yet we enjoy these freedoms, and now we want to stop the most important movement and protest in the entire history of the human race. This is the most important, because this climate crisis, I feel, many people agree with me, is the most existential crisis that's befallen us for 100,000 years.
So when you see protest at the cricket or Wimbledon or George Osborne's wedding or any of these things that capture the headlines, what do you think?
I think to myself, these are people who are, you know, looking for ways to compel the intelligent debate and consciousness around the issue of climate crisis.
And do you think they do that, given how much irritation there is?
I think irritation is a very, very important part of awareness. No, it never comes about politely. It comes about out of irritation. These people they're not terrorists. They're not trying to kill anybody to compel. That would be the ultimate paradox, wouldn't it? To kill in order to save the planet. No, it's not. It's not terrorism. It's just looking for intelligent ways of getting the nerve center of our nations to wake up and face this thing and take it seriously. The fact that people are more annoyed that someone crashed somebody's wedding than they're annoyed about the state of our planet, it seems to me to have got their values a bit askew, and I think it seems to me to be part of the problem. We should be venting that annoyance at the state of what is happening to our rivers.
Can I see another facet of the cube?
Absolutely. We have thrown at people distressing facts, numbers, temperatures, loss of species. Will undersea hydrates collapse? Will the bat and the rhino survive? Will the tiger and the butterfly breathe the same air? Will the fortunes of the songbird revive? Year by year, pollination slows down, and insects, little angels, grow small in number. And still, we drive our fossil fuel cars, make flights around the world, and consume vast amounts of energy. It seems to be asking too much of us to alter how we live so that life on Earth can survive. So I thought maybe love could shift our vision, shift our breath, shift our dreams. Maybe if we all do something modest, then the dead land can yield roses again and desert be fertilized with marigolds. Then real change can be accomplished. Maybe it's not a going back. Perhaps we've grown far too complicated for our own good.
Thank you. Can you tell me about your awakening as a writer? How did it happen? You were a very young, teenager, I suppose.
Wow, Krishnan, that's a big question. If I were to really track the roots of my awakening, it would go something like this. London, brought here by mom and dad when I was 1.5 years. The clash, the strangeness of going from the hot air of Minna to the strange temperature of London and seeing my mother shiver in a corner. And going to school and noticing for the first time that everyone looks at me in a strange way. And then making friends. And then father and mother announced that they're going back to Nigeria. I tell my schoolmates, and they say, bad idea. Africa is full of people who live in trees. Lions roam the streets. Don't go back. So my mother cunningly gets me to go back. Another story. I arrive. It's not what they said. The air is electric with energy and fumes. Not long afterwards, civil war breaks out. Right in the center of my family. My mother is half Igbo, my father is from the Delta. We spend most of the war hiding my mother. I walk out one day in the evening, tired of being confined too long, and I stumble, and I see a man on the floor, his eyes almost the size of footballs. He's dead, blood on his chest. I go into a kind of hallucination. My father picks me up. Something happens to my eyes. I can't see clearly after that. I'm taken to the forest to be treated. When I come back, I'm different. I see the world differently. And then one day, I pick up a pen.
There are some people who believe that the climate crisis will be solved by future things that we don't know. Science, inventions, something will come along.
Yes, I like that unfounded optimism. The climate crisis will not be solved by something that will come along. It will be solved by us being aware of it and doing something about it now, today, together. It's going to require a new community, a new international, a new global community of people who want to see a different kind of world.
Do you think such a thing exists or is possible? A global community that shares a belief?
It is happening already. It's here already. It's already here. The climate crisis has brought us together in a way that almost nothing else has. The two world wars didn't bring us together in that same way. Brought us together to fight, but didn't bring us together with a new awareness of this planet. We feel the same thing. We feel the preciousness of this earth and that we must do something about it, about what we're doing to it. It's just this new, you can almost call it a new renaissance of nature in our consciousness.
So does that make you hopeful?
Yeah, I think that's powerful. I think if that's the only thing that the climate crisis has brought about, that in itself is a wonderful thing. If that blossoms into another kind of mutual respect and mutual working together, I think that's a really great thing.
So you have these two very powerful emotions. One of great impending doom and fear of what is going on, and the other is that there is something new going on in the world as well.
Yes, and I think the newest thing going on isn't talked about enough, which is that I think the climate crisis is hinting at something else. I think the climate crisis is telling us, and this is the first time I'm really phrasing it this way. I might have to put another essay in addition to the next edition of this book. It's telling us that we have outgrown all of our sources of energy up till now. I think the climate crisis is saying that we've grown bigger than fossil fuel. We don't need it. We have our needs, our energy needs is now such that the fossil fuel and all those old forms of energy can no longer meet it. We need to find a new way of using and creating energy. So I think the climate crisis is telling us that we are at the cusp of a new stage of the human civilization. We are meant to leap forward, and we're doing that. And the new is a more efficient way of using energy, a more intelligent way of using energy, one that doesn't actually pollute our world.
Speaking of the old world, how do you feel about being Sir Ben Okri?
It takes some getting used to, but it's.
Is it a good thing?
I think it's. Well, it depends on how you see it. I am a storyteller, and some of the earliest stories that move me, and I think has led to my being here, are those great early stories of knights of the medieval Europe. It's just an idea of sacrificing your spirit to helping to make your community and the world better. That's how I take it. So those stories were always a great inspiration to me, and I find it wonderfully ironic that I now find myself in a modern version of this. Nobody sees it that way, of course, but I'm a storyteller, and storytellers like to go to the root of things.
Because the last time you were in this studio with me, certainly reading your work, was after the Grenfell disaster.
Yeah,
which
yes, I remember that very, very warmly and painfully at the same time.
Which again was a very powerful moment, and it was seen by many millions of people.
Over 6 million people, Krishnan.
But what that disaster also brought to the fore was the hierarchical nature of this country, how that community, or those communities in those kinds of housing blocks, were ignored and not cared for. So how do you feel about this sort of, being in a sort of in a top strata, or do you see yourself as that?
Oh no, I don't see myself as that at all. I see myself as someone who has been given an extra commission to be of service to the world through my art.
So if you could change the world in a way, I mean, without simply saying we'll solve the climate crisis, what is the tool? What is the thing that you would do?
I would like to reawaken in people from childhood a profound feeling for nature. I think if we had that, which we lost it, I think capitalism helped us lose it. I think many of the events of the 20th century helped us become more divorced from nature, from ourselves in a way. But if that feeling for nature were reawoken to the degree that it approached wonder and deep appreciation, half the things we're doing, we wouldn't do them.
And if you wanted to end on poetry, what would be the selection you'd choose?
That'll be a real pleasure. Nature is beautiful, can't be denied. But do we know why? Mahogany trees in teeming forests, English elms whispering in the meadows, the Gulf of Naples, the color of green diamonds, sunlight glimmering on the grass, cornfields in the moonlight, the mystic crown of blue mountains, waterfalls that they call the tears of a god, some unknown force behind it all.
Well, there's your inspiration for rediscovering our link with nature.
I hope so.
It's beautiful. Ben Okri, thank you very much indeed.
Real blessing talking to you. Thank you very much.